Dude, you are getting well. Dudes, I am so excited for this show today. Oh, man, there is an amazing award-winning storyteller and poet, and he's been named the best storyteller of the year by Forbes. His name is Max Stossel. Max, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Ben. Good to see you.
It's good to see you. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I really like that intro of you meditating and oming and telling us that we're getting well.
Awesome. I'm so glad. Thank you. Thank you. That means it landed, and I want us to take life a little less seriously while we're doing it too. So Max, you're an award-winning storyteller and poet. Now, when you were a little kid, were you like, I'm going to grow up and be a storyteller?
When I was a little kid, I was like, I'm going to grow up and be a soccer player.
Ooh.
That didn't happen. Gratefully. I'm grateful that didn't happen. But no, I didn't apparently I wrote poetry when I was a really little kid. I was in like first grade and second grade. I just saw a yearbook and my teacher was like, Max, you're the class poet, but I had no memory of that whatsoever. And then I hadn't really written until adulthood after that, where I heard a poet perform named InQ. And I was just like struck by it, and it was buzzing and alive inside me. And I started writing after that. And that was what got me back into the flow of things.
Wow. That's awesome. I want to talk about that moment when you got there. First of all, I love that you played soccer. That was also my dream as a kid.
Was it? I didn't know that.
I know. See, you would know if you didn't know. But there's one of my favorite players earlier, Freddie Adu.
Oh, yeah.
It was like a signed autograph thing. He was going to be the next Pele. And I even remember this book from the 1970s I had on my bookshelf of Pele. It's like someone must have given it to me for like $1 at a book sale or something. But yeah, it was like soccer was life. And anyway, my stories, we're here for you today. But I love that, anyone's like, yeah, I played soccer. I'm like, cool. I just found out my local village of 800 people has this like incredible, it feels secret to me because I've lived here 2 years and don't know about it, but they have this amazing like over 30 soccer league, and many of them actually. So there's like a pretty profound soccer contingency here. So I'm hoping to take it up in the near future and just, keep the knee guards on, protect the ACLs. That's what I hear from everyone over 40.
Yeah, I played for the first time in a while the other day and just like went in for a tackle, head-to-head collision, like bleeding down my face, and was
oh my god,
a couple of days. So
yeah, wow, I'm glad you're okay.
Normally, I know how to avoid those sort of things, which is like an unlucky bump. But anyway, on to other things.
Well, it's part of life, right? You actually said you were glad that you didn't end up doing soccer. So why are you glad that you didn't? What had you say that?
I think just my life when I was so in sports, and that was, I was captain of high school soccer team and tennis team, captain of college soccer team. I really played for a while, but just so much of my life was just about like competition and winning and like, just like dedicated around sports. And just like, I don't think I had very much depth or richness to other aspects of my life. And I imagine if I had continued on that path, not that I was ever really good enough where this was going to be an idea. It's not like, I hung up the boots and I decided that I wasn't going to be a professional soccer. No, that was never. Once high school had started, it was pretty clear that was not going to be my path.
But you played in college anyway.
I played a D3 in college. Yeah.
What was your position?
I played outside midfield. Played left mid. I was very good at going one-on-one with people. My ball skills are exceptional and would score.
And a great runner.
Can run for a long time, not that fast.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I just don't think there was that much depth in my life outside of it. I think my relationships were much thinner, and there's just been much more richness in my life post soccer, and so I'm grateful for it in that way.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing that. And when did you start writing? When did you start telling stories?
Yeah, that was after I heard.
What's your earliest memory of writing? Actually, I'd love to know that.
Earliest memory of writing.
Yeah.
Um, I remember in like second grade, some like haiku, or fifth grade, some haiku competition that I like that I entered something in, and my teachers liked it so much, and she was like, "We got to submit it to like this," and I was like, "Okay, cool." I didn't win or anything like that, but I have that
You
memory.
got seen then. Yeah. I always am curious, like, what makes an impression on us as children, because ultimately how we're taught and or how we're punished or how we're awarded we can make up a lot of things about ourselves as adults. So it's cool that that was honored then and you remember that. Haikus in particular, that's a specific art form for sure. And then where do you remember first writing poetry?
Um, like you mean as a child?
Hmm.
Saying haikus don't count as poetry?
Oh yeah, they do. But sorry, yeah, I was thinking like when you started writing. I guess yeah, no, that makes sense. I was thinking further, like deeper along the lines, but what was that moment as an adult you said, or as a teenager when you first saw someone and it had a profound impact on you, and you said that?
Yeah,
Can you tell us about that moment?
that was when in Q I performed this poem about falling in love at 85, which is a beautiful poem and also online. And I just had remembered a lot of the lines, and it was just like really stayed present in me. And on the way home, my arms were literally buzzing, and I was like, "What's happening?" And I was starting to write, try to figure out what was going on. And the first two lines of what I wrote in processing rhymed. Like I'm sitting pondering like the beauty of slam poetry, wondering the reason it so flows in me. And I was like, "Oh, that rhymes. Can I maybe do this?" And then I finished
Mm.
it as a poem. And yeah, I shared it with him the next day. I was like, "Hey, I wrote a poem after you shared. Do you want to hear?" And he was kind of like, "Okay," which I now totally understand of how often as a poet people say that to you. But then I shared it with him, and he was like, "You should consider pursuing this. Like this is pretty good." And I would just write on the train a lot, like as I was doing other work and other jobs. And yeah, then friends started asking me to perform at their events and things like that. And it has budded into more of a career. And I started turning them into films because I wanted to get like the essence of these poems through the screen. And it didn't feel like me just talking into a camera was the same. And so I wanted to turn them
Mm.
into films, and I did that. Those were received really well. And yeah, and then I've built up to just having released the special of the live hour stage show that I've been doing before COVID and live, and that felt so filling and people were loving it. And then I turned that into a film in the same way I had done individual poems. So that's like an hour special that I hope if you're listening, you can watch on the website. It's free at wordsthatmove.com. And that's, yeah, like a big creative baby that I've been working on for years.
That's incredible. You dropped a lot in there.
Sure.
And
See
first
my
of
job.
all, I'm gonna put in along with the website and in the show notes for this episode, but I'm also gonna post this here live if you're watching or live now or later. We'll have that in there,
Cool.
wordsthatmove.com. Um, when did you start pursuing this professionally? Like, I mean, it's one thing to write poetry and, what was and there'll be like I want to ask you a second part to this question, right? It's I Poetry and slam was part of my life. It really came out of me, and when especially when I moved to New York City and I was around it, I was exposed to it, a new way of expressing myself that lit me up. Like, what was it about? Yeah, I guess even I want to ask you earlier, like before we go to like, professional, like what was it about poetry? What is it about storytelling that lights you up? What had you hungry for more beyond that one poem that you were writing on the train and stuff? Like how did you what did you make of it and why?
So yeah, so one, I want to note of like, I think as humans, we're so good and often eager at um, after something happens, trying to explain this is why it happened. And when sometimes the why is not even really the why, but we're really good at creating reasons for what that why was. And I can do that. And I just want to recognize that's a little bit of what I'm about to do is telling you a why that makes sense. And I can paint you a pretty picture of the why when honestly it was alive in me. There was something that was resonating. And then afterwards I can look for what is it about this, but there just was something that was resonating.
Mhm.
And I think for me, part of it was like as someone who has always had a passion for like communicating and seeing and being seen, it seemed like this rhyme and rhythm were this incredible vehicle to like really deeply hold someone's attention for like long times. You could just really like we're so with you at every word and like really going in and there. And the poetry I was drawn to was not like flowery, complicated poetry as much as it was like just sort of where there was almost like this train of the rhyme and rhythm, like help you follow you through this point and the the stories that were being told. And so I think that really appealed to me. And I really liked the way that when I could tell a story in this format, that I would just have the grip of the person I was talking to or of an audience, and that this was a way to say a thing that I cared about deeply in a way that could be deeply heard. And that really appealed to me. But that first moment, I was just like, whoa, something is happening here. This is awesome. I'm inspired. And I didn't have all that extra thought on top of it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for taking us in that journey. Like, what that obviously, yeah, there's been something inside of you, right, that's wanted to come out and expressed in that way, and you've been really lit up by this art form, which I love. And that was all in New York City.
Yeah, in New York City. It was probably like 2013ish, probably about 10 years ago.
Yeah, wow.
2012. Yeah.
And where were some of the places that you most loved to hear poetry there?
So in the beginning, I was very afraid of taking in too much and like absorbing other styles. Because I am, especially was then, felt so impressionable. Of like I would see something and take it on
Yeah.
so much,
Yeah.
um, and so for a while, I like really was trying. How accurate was this really? But I was trying to like not taint my what was coming out through me by taking in other stuff. And then later on, of like Bowery Poetry Club, I thought was really cool. Nuyorican is incredibly like awesome. It also didn't feel like the most welcoming environment for me, partially as like a white dude, and understandably. But the Bowery Poetry Club was one where I felt more taken in it at home, and
Hmm.
those are two spots in New York that I think are pretty good for it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Those are two of my favorites for sure. We actually my wife, we have a band called Dirty May, and my wife produced a music festival a couple of years ago called the Big Red Fest to celebrate women, and we had this marching band, and we all wore red, and we donated all the proceeds to a shelter for women of domestic violence, and we had this huge march from Washington Square all the way to the Bowery Poetry Club, and that's where we did all the performance, and it was
Oh,
like
cool.
art and music and visual art, and it's really cool to see. I think it's like partially a burlesque venue now as well,
Hmm.
but it was good to see some of the bones still there. It's changed a little bit. I made a whole movie in there actually. I want to say it was probably 2009 or 10. It was probably right before I met you, about saving art, about saving these venues. It's called We Are the Hartmans,
Hmm.
and it was actually one of the people in that movie that was the co-producer and co-star with me, and I was the lead in it. And it's like a feel-good romantic comedy, but it was sort of the first movie about like the Occupy movement before Occupy Wall Street happened, directed by this incredible woman, Laura Newman, and who now like performs around the world on a school bus and with the band. And my friend Jonah Spear, who is a producer, and Jonah introduced me to. I just love how he thought, and he was this amazing adult who was brilliant, but also had lots of fun. And he introduced me to this camp called Camp Grounded, and it was this camp for adults, a summer camp, and you had to put away your phones and take on a name, and really have a lot of fun. And it was there that I met you, and I even got to hear your poetry live and really feel your spirit and see how you moved other people. And I always thought like, man, I want to stay in touch with that guy. So
Wow.
I was really moved when, like, I
So
don't
cool
know
to
what,
hear how
10
that
years
conversation.
later I got a message from you about this, and it didn't click right away who you are because we didn't really know each other's names then,
No, we were by different names. I would have been
right?
Balance.
And I was Cowboy. I had a mohawk at some point.
That's cool to hear
Um,
how it all comes full circle with some of that Bowery Poetry Club, almost like the way
yeah,
art does, the essence of something
right.
connecting.
All the way back to Bowery Poetry Club led me to you, and here we are talking about it today.
Yeah,
That's why I love
connecting people
the
even
roots of
before we
art.
realize it's happening.
Yeah, and now we've posted it here on the in the chat and on Facebook and YouTube. So if you're listening, thank you. Don't forget to subscribe and click on this and follow Max. Check out his work. It is incredibly moving. What I've seen of it has been powerful. It's engaging. I love it. Maybe you can give us a taste of it a little bit later. Do you remember any of your earliest and like your earliest influence? Like, did your parents read to you? Do any storytelling? Like, what do you remember storytelling in your early years as a kid?
Parents would read to me. Apparently, the only books I wanted to read as a kid, when I was like a teenager, the only thing I would read was Harry Potter. Nothing else would grab my ADD attention. But that was, and they would read to me Dr. Seuss and Lost Shel Silverstein, and I always loved those growing up. I do remember my dad. I have an older sister, and my dad had changed all of the pronouns in like the books to be she for her. Like, so a lot of the books
Mm,
that we had like these crossed out E's and like S's written in them. And I do wonder how that's impacted me and like my relationship with women as I think of I do consider myself to be very empathetic to like a lot of with a lot of women in my life and female
uh-huh.
perspective. And some part of me wonders like, did that play any kind of part in there? But they definitely
Yeah.
said to me. And yeah, dad is a journalist, so a professional storyteller in some ways, and mom was a TV producer and now is a therapist, which is its own kind of like storytelling and humanness. And so
Hmm.
definitely a family of storytellers. My sister is like an amazing writer, even though she's not in that profession. And so it's all around me for sure.
Oh wow, that's really cool to hear. And definitely an artistic family and communicators, right? Like even therapists, like the power of communication and word, whether it be spoken or listened or written. Uh, what are the what did you study in college?
Psychology, majored in psychology at Haverford, which was yeah, school was such like a well, I don't know, just like I'm supposed to get through this and get a job, I guess. And there was so little I was interested in. My mom often says like I was too young or immature to actually appreciate my education, which I think is accurate. Um, I
I think
was
most of us are at that age, actually. I
yeah.
went back to college 10 years later. It was a lot better.
Did you? Oh, that's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah. I finished my senior year at NYU at age 30. It's like
Nice.
the same age as my professors then.
Nice. Yeah, it seems like a more open to learning time. And then psych was the one category where I was like, oh, how people work. This is interesting to me.
Hmm. Cool. And then when did you start doing this professionally? Like did you ever move into acting or was this just like from poetry? Like how did it
Yeah,
that
it's just
storytelling part
just
come in?
from poetry. I after I made
Not
the first
just from poetry. I mean, that's a powerful thing to say right there.
and yeah, after making the first couple of films, I was thinking, okay, like these are getting lots of views, like I can make a career out of this or something here. And I was surrounded by people who are like, you got to turn your passion into a job, which looking back on it is not advice that I would give to people. It's like, I
Hmm.
think do your passion. And if it turns into a job, great. But make sure that your passion doesn't turn into something that you're not passionate about or that you don't try to force it into something that it's not. I think can often be more fulfilling. But yeah, and so I was like hustling around and doing side jobs and a little bit of like social media consulting at that time. And I was selling Instagram accounts on the black market. I was buying Instagram accounts from teenagers who were building them up to thousands of followers and then selling them to brands who wanted like to use the Instagram accounts for their like, I don't know, models or something like that. And I
Hmm.
was just like hustling around doing weird stuff like that.
That's
Um,
resourceful.
yeah. And anyway, to this day, like, poetry is a portion of my income, but I also have this other side of work where I give presentations to teenagers about how social media is impacting our lives and relationships. And that's the majority of my income. It allows my art to be my art. And I'm grateful for that structure. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that spoke to me too, like the way you talk to children about that, because I think that's a big missing in not children, teenagers about that, because I think that's a big missing in our society, education. I'm thinking how amazing it would be if we had a communication or a relationship class in high school, something to talk about things, so we're not just receiving information through social media nowadays
Totally.
and all that we're struggling through. And so I think it's so beautiful. I mean, I ask all of my clients to do some writing and get in touch with the written word again in their life and whatever voice they may have inside of them that way. What have been some of your practices that have really allowed you to stay, I know with a lot of, well, I've heard with writers and certainly for myself, without accountability, I've often found, and even like with music or any discipline, like, without developing a daily practice, it can seem very daunting or challenging at times. Like, what are some of the practices that have helped you kind of keep that creative flow going?
Yeah, I do tend to be on the side of like really just trying to let it happen when it happens, and not,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have like structured writing practices where I've tried, weeks at a time where I've showed up at the same time every day and like tried to write. That often hasn't been what creates the work that like I end up feeling good about. And so I
Mm.
presently am not in practices like that. Not to say that I won't go back in and out of things like that.
But
And
thank you for saying that. You're honoring your intuition and your flow when it's there.
yeah, and
Yeah.
sometimes that's like a scary thing of like, will it visit again? Of like how it's working, and
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Like, will this come back anytime soon? Because
yeah. And so it's especially hard if you're trying. That's part of why, especially with creativity, if you're trying to make a career out of it, trying to force it to be like, okay, like inspiration, like you're gonna show up at this time. It's like, it doesn't really work that way.
mm,
And so yeah, that can be tricky. But I lead writing workshops about once a month where I like just gather people online. It was really nice through COVID. It, like provided a really nice sense of community for folks, and just like a really lovely wide variety of humans who would show up to these events, and we just would talk for like a half hour. We'd go off and write, and we come back together and share, and just like the style that I encourage and facilitate is not like, here's how we're gonna write and here's the structure. It's like just like let it happen and flow out and see what comes, and really try to get out of the way and really be with whatever is present there, and then work from that. And that's the
mm.
type of writing that we do in these workshops, and it creates a nice little dynamic.
Cool. Do you still do any of those workshops?
Yeah, still doing them about once a month.
And if
And
someone was listening and they wanted to join, where might we find it?
yeah, if you go on the website, if you search for workshops, there'll be
Uh-huh.
a link there. Also, if you send me a message on any of the things, there's like a WhatsApp group of people who have come to them. I can add you, and it's like a nice little community.
Cool. On wordsthatmove.com. So go there to check out his movie and also to sign up for his workshop.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. If something that happened to me today that feels relevant to talk about with you is there's this company called Domestica that does online courses and education, and I did like a writing course with them that really is just like, it's almost like hardly a course, and that what I'm helping you do is just like write, like get out of your own way and write. And then there's some stuff on editing, how once you have something to go through and feel what's right, but really from your own perspective. And I'm noticing, there's something like 700 people have taken it. It's got, I think, like 32 reviews, and like 90% of them are like, this was really great and so helpful. And then 1%, or I don't know, 10% of them are people being like, you didn't teach me how to write. And like the people who are upset. Um, and it's also interesting to me within my own social media stuff. This is a principle on social media, is that even though the 9 out of 10 people are like, this is so great and so different from other writing courses, thank you, it sticks in me. Like the 1 out of 10 stick in me. And it's like, oh
Mm.
man, like I let someone down, or they're upset and they came in and they didn't get what they wanted. It's such a bummer. And it's interesting to notice in myself how the negative stuff like seems to land, and seems to be harder to shake than the positive stuff is relieving and celebratory for me.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And just want to say I think you're definitely not alone. Assume most of the people listening to this could probably relate to that at some point. And I know I have. Like, I definitely used to have, like, if there's one person in the room that doesn't like me, I would focus on that person, or if there's that one thing. But I also hear that you really care and you want everyone to have a great experience. And so if someone doesn't or doesn't respond the way we'd like them to, it can feel personal in some way, right? And so clearly you still keep showing up. So thank you for doing that work. What are some of the, like, what's one of the, you think the hardest moments you've had to face in your life thus far, where you remember that writing got you through it, or your storytelling got you through it?
What comes to mind is like there's one in particular that certainly comes to mind, but the heartbreaks in my life, like relationship heartbreak. And it's been rarer that and it's happened, and with a couple of connections especially, where while I'm in the love and it's happening and flowing, where I'm like writing love poems or things like that, but I'm much more frequently in breakup and in heartbreak, I'm pouring out like stuff, and that has felt very therapeutic and very helpful. And yeah, two heartbreaks in particular, which I guess were the main ones that I experienced while being a poet or calling myself a poet,
Yeah.
are ones where I really poured quite a lot into writing. And yeah, it does feel in many ways like art has saved my life, in the sense of like given purpose in these times that can feel so empty and hopeless. And then also I'm in awe of the way that, like, whether it's somebody else's art or my own, just like how the way I can connect and give both myself and others things that exactly what we needed in a moment without knowing that we needed it. And the way things find us or find each other in the, like, at exactly the right time on art's schedule is something that I just continue to be in awe of the way that happens. And also has become like a guiding like light for me of when I'm having the thoughts of like, oh, why aren't more people watching this thing, or that, like, to trust of that this will, if I can trust the muse and trust the inspiration and follow that, I trust that it will find the people that it's supposed to find at the right time. And that's not necessarily about lots of people. It's about finding the right people. And it's a form of love and care for each other. And in those moments of heartbreak, art was a form of love and care for me, of like processing the stuff that felt so heavy and so much, and like just trying to do something with all of this feeling. And especially for heartbreak, it's like when it feels like it can't go towards the person I want to give it to. It's like there's so much, and then where else can I put it? And then it's a question of who does it even make? Do I feel called to share it with others when no, it just wants to go here?
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I'm thinking about like country music and blues, and like every rock song or love song. I feel like heartbreak is definitely, that's for me when it used to pour out. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that inside of those times when it's gotten you through. And what had you make it a profession? Like, when did you say, and you talked about film too. So, were you a filmmaker first? Like, what was the medium that really, I mean, maybe that's
I
not
had
first.
never made a film before Subway Love, and I was incredibly naive of and Subway Love was the first one I made, and it went viral, which is an unusual thing to like for it to work this way, and in some way that has pros and cons. And I was incredibly naive. I was like, oh, I just need a video person, and I found one video person who happened to be an editor, a director, an effects person. I had totally lucked out that he happened to do the whole process, but I have come to learn that there are lots of people that it takes to be to make films, and lots of skill sets. But yeah, I had not. It was just out of a passion for these poems and getting the messages out that I just kind of hustled around and did what I needed to do to make those things happen. And I was trying to make it a career and a profession for a while there. And more recently, I've been much more about letting it happen. Like, it's a part of my professional life, and it's wonderful when I get paid to perform. I love that. Or paid to make videos. That's great. And my job as an artist is to follow the inspiration and the heart. And that's more important to me than figuring out the career path of it.
Thank you so much for that. How did Subway Love come about? You mentioned that for people who don't know what that is. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was a poem I wrote while waiting for the train in New York City and wanting people to just like connect more. It's this romantic story of falling in love while waiting for the train and taking advantage of the possibilities at every moment.
Hmm.
And I would perform that live for people at like different events or to friends, and they would say, "Can you send me that?" And I would write it out and be about to send the email because, of course, yeah, I want you to have it. And it just didn't feel like what I was talking about when I read it. It just didn't feel the same.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
thought, what can I do that will help this thing that I love? And I want people to have. How can I give it to people through a screen? And there was you ever see the David Foster Wallace speech, "This is Water"? You heard of that?
Yeah, I a long time ago. I can't remember it too well, but yeah, I remember hearing about it for sure. It's resonating in there.
And it's been just the story retold, and it was given new life in the movie Soul, which I love recently. But it was it's a, story of two young fish swimming along. One turns to the other, says, "Good morning, boys. How's the water?" And one fish, they swim on for a while, and sorry, they pass another fish. Fish says that to them. They swim on for. I just butchered that. They swim on for a while, and then one turns to the other and says, "What the heck is water?" And it's just about noticing the little things in front of us. And there's
Mm,
a filmmaker named Matthew Friedel who had turned that speech into this just like beautiful, like condensed it to this 9-minute piece that went like mega viral on the internet and was just so well done at the way it enhanced these words and like visually put them on, like visually brought the story to life. And I just was so moved by that art touching me in that way. That was like, oh yes, this
mm,
was just spectacular. And also, like 8 people had told me to watch that before I did. It was like the universe wouldn't shut up about this one. And yeah, watched it. And then later I was thinking like, okay, who brings these stories to life? And he does. And I reached out and I tried to get a hold of him. At the time, I think like I was a little bit more manipulative than I am now, to be honest. I called up and I was like, I told his assistant, I was like, oh, I'm gonna have a project with the Discovery Channel and I want to see if Matt's available for it. That wasn't true at all. And then I got on the phone with him and I was just like, hey, none of that is real. I have a poem. Can I do a poem for you? I want to turn this poem into a film. He was like, okay. And I performed the
wow.
poem and he was like, all right, that was cool. And he's like, so what do you want to do? I was like, I just want to film this. I want to turn it into life. You bring things to life so well. Um,
Mm,
and he's like, what's your budget? I was like, I don't know. I don't have really a budget. He's like, you have no budget? I was like, uh, he's like, you fly me to New York? I was like, yeah, I'll fly to New York. And then he, out of the goodness of his heart and the love for the piece, came and put this together. And it was funny because
wow.
that happened with, uh, so like I was like, okay, who's gonna be the dancers in this film as well, dancing on the subway? And
Yeah.
finding them, I had a friend recommend a cousin of theirs, and I went to see this cousin's show, and afterwards met her at a bar and was like, asked the bartender to turn the music down so I could perform the poem and see if she would do it. And like I paid the like the actors and the dancers. I could afford those things, just like real video production at the time. I didn't feel like I could afford, uh,
Mm,
and Matt and Celia Ralston Hall was like a world class choreographer, and the dancers were like, "Yeah, we need choreography. Like, we don't just it's not just like dancing. Like, films have choreography." And at the time, I was so naive about all this. I was like, "Okay, so we need a choreographer. Tell me choreographer's name." And there's like, "Well, there's this person, but I don't know if you'll be able to get her." And I like called this woman like so many times for 4 months. She was like constantly traveling, and I just was always getting like her machine and stuff like that. And I sent her emails and I was like, can I perform this poem for you? Can I perform this poem for you? And she's awesome. She was like, I think she only got like one of my 70 messages. And she was like, what? Awesome. Yes. Don't even tell me it's going to happen. Just call this number and start performing the poem for me. Like, don't even tell me it's going to happen. That's amazing. Couldn't get a hold of her for like ever. Eventually, I was like in like, I think a cab, and I finally got a hold of her. And like from the back of this cab, I was did the poem for her. She was like, all right, I'll be in New York for these dates. Do you want to do it then? And she came in and it was just so awesome and so cool.
Wow.
And yeah, it all came together that way. I
That's
met
amazing.
met the male dancer Ryan Weiss, who was like a friend, and learned that he had like a whole previous Broadway career, and then he was down for it. And it was just lots of really awesome people coming together because they loved the poem, and I ran around just trying to perform the poem for lots of people, and it all came together that way.
Yeah. Wow. That's incredible. I mean, you really took a lot of action towards what you cared about. You were so committed,
Hmm.
and then it showed up. All these people came together. Did you ever write poems like or perform them in Washington Square Park or the subways or anything like that?
I haven't done that. I think I would like to. I would.
I just
I'm
had
also
this
very
vision of you there for a moment. I was like, I wonder if I ever saw him like back then, because I've been roaming those streets for 20 years.
and Washington Square Park would be good too. Also, Subway Love was written while waiting for the train at West Fourth Street, which is like right
Oh,
there.
yeah. Oh, yeah. That's
And
amazing. I was thinking about it with you in subways. Like, God, it's so amazing that it was really moved by that piece and that story and your knack for storytelling and how you're able to put that together. And that, what do you think had it go viral? Like, what do you think about that story that people wanted to share?
so one at the time, so right now, I think I'm about to release a bunch of other short films that I don't expect to go to be shared the same way. The ecosystem is so different online, and like if you're not doing things in these very specific formats, it doesn't seem like I don't know how virality happens. And But yeah, at the time it was much more open for things to be spread around the internet, and I could post something on YouTube, and then the YouTube video could be shared on other platforms without them competing with each other and being like, we don't
Hmm.
want to share YouTube videos to da da da. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, I'd written out an email to friends because I was going to ask all my friends to share it. And by the time I had finished the email, it was already going viral. I didn't even send the email. And I think like that was just one, I had performed it a lot and people had been asking for it. And then yeah, it struck a chord. I don't know. I don't know the what
Mm.
especially. Um, but it did, and I'm glad it did, and I'm glad it resonates with people and has all of these different touch points now around, yeah, around the world. That does feel really good as I sit here
Yeah.
reflecting on the life of that piece, which is also the last piece in the special, which feels good as well.
Well, you've really turned your pain into your purpose in some senses. Like those, you've been able to put that into your words and the heartache and moved mountains with your words. Literally, I mean, every call, every conversation, just creating this poetry and standing in your art unapologetically. It's so incredible. I've had so many friends who are visual artists and been afraid to share their work. Like, what if no one likes it? Well, if you don't put it out there, then no one will see it ever. So the people who like it won't ever see it.
Hmm.
And so I hear you really like it, just I hear a bold courage in how you shared that, like a lot of confidence in that piece to be able to call up these people and say, yeah, I want to make this film, but I don't know what I'm doing, but come, like that. I mean, that takes some confidence. I think that's really incredible. It's something that I believe even a lot of actors people I've coached, who are afraid to pick up the phone and like reach out for the things they want, just to take that action. Like, where do you think that came from? Was that something you were just born with? You
I
believe
think
in
I
your
was
work
just
so
reflecting as
much?
you. I appreciate your reflection. I was thinking
Yeah.
about it, and I think like I, certainly at the time it wasn't like as much confidence in myself as it was confidence in this piece.
Mm,
It was like I really loved this thing. And I was like, oh, this thing is like beautiful and wants to be shit. Like I loved this. And I was like willing to fight for this thing. It almost didn't feel like me as much as like it's like if I can just get them to hear this, like this piece is they will love this piece. Um and I think that was the confidence of it there, where it was like, being surrounded at the time by people who were like going, sometimes in ways that are not necessarily things I would endorse, but like to be around that was also inspiring for me at the time. But I think I just really believed in this poem, and I thought if people heard it, they would want to share it with the world because they're going to want to be a part of it. Like I believed that. Maybe it
yeah.
was naive. It was exactly the naivety I needed at that moment. Um, yeah, but I believed in the poem.
Beautiful. And you believed or you created, whether you believed it did or not, you created, this entire piece now, in this movie, and that's available on wordsthatmove.com. and with a lot of your work in it, and some really really incredible stuff. I love the the piece on the parts on dogs, and how dogs talk, and you talk a little bit about the emotional state of our world. Can you talk a little bit about that here today? Like um what do you believe is the emotional state of our world, and how do you think we can change that, or make a difference? You know, I see a lot of kids struggling with youth. Also want to give you a plug for the work you do with youth too. And if you could, I feel like that sort of connects to the emotional state of our world, but I'm wondering if that was just there for me too, like in the emotional state, like thank you for talking to these kids and about these things. But anyway, I'll let you
Sure.
talk.
I'll call it with that. That's called Social Awakening.
Mm.
Socialawakening.org is the website for that, and the company I founded around that work. That work is so busy. There's like, I've been booked solid for school after school after school after school for this entire year, and like into the next one. And so like that one, I appreciate the plug, and also I'm like, I don't know if more attention needs to go to that right now. Like let's so I guess I'm really looking forward to a break. Um, and it's incredibly fulfilling and important work, and has a big place in my heart. It's just been exhausting I've probably done 45 school presentations in the past 3 weeks, and that's just, I'm
Wow.
tired in this moment.
Have you ever
Um,
thought about creating a team of people to train to do
I
it for
plan to,
you?
yeah, it needs to be the right people who like both have the storytelling skills and potentially some experience in tech, or it might be social media influencers. I think kids might listen to social media influencers,
Yeah,
but about the
I
mental
love
health
that.
challenge of social media. But yeah, an emotional state of our world. I actually have I think I want to share what feels right is I think I want to share two things. We're talking about Subway Love. I think it makes sense to close this podcast with Subway Love. But before that, as I see this
Amazing.
big header underneath us of how leaders transform their pain into purpose during COVID, and talking about challenging emotions and fully feeling challenging emotions and moving through them as opposed to running from them, which social media makes it very easy to run away from any difficult thing. We have this escape machine in our pocket at every little anxiety. And if we're going through something really intense, maybe how wonderful that we have an escape machine, but we're running from every little anxiety and letting stuff build and build and build, and can feel tremendously heavy. And over COVID, I heard of this analogy um, of uh, of like living from the seed's perspective. And I really liked it. And it inspired this piece of that when we stop and smell the flowers, we don't think about the seed. We take in
Mhm.
the beauty of such fragrant blossoming. We marvel at all that nature can be, but we don't think about the seed that had no idea what it would become, that comes from the one above who begun this journey out into the sun before being overcome by darkness, or for some scattered through wind, water, or fire. That's right, some seeds actually require fire to open. Over time, evolution learned that sometimes fires happen, so it embraced them, made them a part of creation. So the seed feels it's burning from the inside. It doesn't know what to do. It's lost, alone, and confused, and overcome with pain that shoots straight through its entire core. It must wonder what any of this is for, buried deep beneath this floor. Hey, why'd you bury me here, Lord? It smells like death and feels like worms. "Ah, at least I have this shell," it murmurs. "Without it, I could not endure." And then that cracks open too. And suddenly it morphs to this completely foreign form, which of course only scares it more. And in that crisis, it bursts from the soil it's come to know as this abusive home, and it sees that light that once had shone before the darkness had begun. And as the skies cry down upon this mangled body that has come, it does the only thing it can. It grows. It rises towards the sun. We want to be the flower, but we don't think about the seed. We don't think about how much we need to battle through the gift of all this pain that we've received to blossom into everything we're meant to be. The greatest beauty is given to us slowly. Flowers don't appear magically, except they do. They appear magically and slowly too. And so do you. if you have the patience to bloom, the strength and patience to battle through the challenges in front of you, divinely designed to push you, test you to the very edges of what you can do, you're supposed to wonder how much longer you have to blindly sit and stew inside this darkness that surrounds you. Life will overwhelm you, because the greatest beauty is not pretty to make. The greatest beauty takes time and struggle and patience and mess to create. And it is not possible for a seed to see the beauty of its destiny. And we are blossoming. The struggle is the seedling that's becoming something more. Sometimes it just takes time to realize what it's all been for.
Yes. Snapping for that one. Wow. Whew. That was powerful. I feel like that's going to be washing over me for a while. Wow. Thank you for that. What a gift. Well, if you're listening and this is landing, I'd like you to comment and let us know. And please follow Max and go to wordsthatmove.com to check out his performances and his work live, on stage, on film. Max, I have a few questions I love to ask all of my guests before we go. And the first one is, what if your life were a Hollywood film up until now, what would you name it?
Learning to love.
Awesome. And who would you cast as your parents?
Who would I cast as my parents? Am I allowed to cast my parents as my parents?
Sure, yeah. This first people come to
That's
mind.
what I want to do. I want them to be themselves. I want to laugh at all of the awkward and funny moments of them trying to act and the discomfort of actually doing it. And that would be very fun.
That's amazing. That's great. I love it. And it's interesting to ask a poet this, but what's your favorite curse word?
I like fuck a lot. It has a lot of different things that it can elicit and talk about and be used in so many different contexts.
Yeah. Great.
And it's got some controversy in it. Sometimes people will tell me of Subway Love, for example, the one negative comment on there that I have seen was, oh, like, want to share this, but there's that one curse word in there, so I can't. And it's got one big old fucking in there that quite a fit for certain people.
Well, it's hard to be in New York without a fuck in it.
Yeah, you're right. It's a New York story.
That's great. And if you could give the world one gift today, what would you give us?
Really want the world to love itself. Like, I really want people to like deeply love and trust themselves. And I really want that to be the case. And it feels in the way of a lot of beautiful things that are so close. And yeah, that feels true.
Thank you for that. And if the world got all that love and people learn to love themselves, what do you see us all doing?
Anything and everything we want. All of it, without shame or judgment. Just like, great, this is what wants to happen right now. And it's so much fun.
That's great. Well, thank you for that. Well, that's full of beautiful possibility here today. And is there anything you'd like to say before we close?
No, I feel complete. I mean, I don't know how much editing you do in here, but if you can make Subway Love be happen right here and right now, where I can just, and then that video starts playing for people, then that's wonderful. And if not, there's a video called Subway Love that you can watch. Nice closure.
Amazing. Yeah, well, we'll create that right now. Subway Love. Yeah, I could drop it in. We will definitely create some Instagram reels, and we'll have this will be a podcast episode everywhere you love to stream, mostly Google, Apple, and Spotify. And so for all you guys listening, just a reminder to subscribe so you can be the first one to hear this when it comes out. And we'll be sure to link in Subway Love, and all of the work you do is so beautiful. I'm going to sit down tonight. Well, tonight's Passover, so I probably won't tonight, but tomorrow night. In fact, I'll make a date night of it, and we'll watch your movie together, my wife and our other friends. I look forward to soaking that up. So thank you so much for giving us your time and your love and your words today. I'm moved by them. So please be sure to check out Max. And Max, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me. And yeah, that was the thing. Of course, yes, the special, wordsthatmove.com/special, my creative baby. Watch that as my last words to you all.
Yes, the special for sure. Great. That's what